Hey, Steve here from Guitar Zoom. Thank you so much for joining me. Today what I thought I would talk to you about is ear training and developing that a little bit if you've never really worked with that before. So there's a lot of ways you can utilize ear training, and I just want to give you a few tips to think about today. So the first thing is developing your interval recognition, okay? Which means, for instance, we know that a scale is built off, whole steps and half steps and that sort of thing. Getting used to being able to hear things like the root, the third, and the fifth. Or maybe it's the minor third. That sort of thing. Trying to get used to being able to hear those and identify some of those intervals. Now, there's a lot of intervals, and you may not necessarily identify all of them all of the time, and that's okay. But just getting used to some of maybe the primary ones is very, very important, okay? So root, third, fifth, maybe the seventh. And understand that, like the third, for instance, you might try and work with getting used to hearing the major third versus the minor third. So if that makes sense, that's what you want to try and work with, is just basic intervals, getting used to that. And then maybe you go into doing the seconds or, the sixth or something like that. But start with the root, third, fifth and try and get used to hearing both the major and the minor third. I think that's really important. The next thing is trying to figure out melodic dictation. So think about this. If I was playing something like... right? Something you've heard a million times. And it doesn't need to be in a particular key. It doesn't need to be in a particular spot on the fretboard. It doesn't need to be on a particular string. You can go anywhere you want. But just take something easy, something that you've heard a million times in your brain. Maybe it's a melody to a song. A popular song, or maybe it's, a children's song or something like that, and see if you can figure out how it goes on the fretboard. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that when you're figuring it out, you're thinking in terms of theory, like you're thinking in terms of a major third or something like that. Maybe you're just using your ear to develop the pitches. You can always think of the intervals and stuff afterward, and it's very important to understand that those are two very different things, which is why we're talking about them separately. Being able to identify the sound of a major third is very important. But to be honest with you, I think even more important is being able to identify something that you hear, okay? Some melody that you hear, or a melody that you hear in your head, or whatever it might be. And so just developing something very simple like that is a very great idea. The next thing that you could do, again, maybe it might be a melody to a song or something. The next thing is trying to develop an ear for simple chords. Okay, it doesn't have to be anything dramatic, but something very straightforward. Like learning how to hear major versus minor. Right? Being able to hear those sounds as you play. Okay? So as you hear a song, now, I can't do it for you right now, but you might have a friend that could help you with something like this, where they play a chord and say, tell me whether it's major or minor, right? So they play something, and you listen to the quality, and you say to yourself, oh, that sounds like it's minor. Now, in talking about this, there's one thing I want to stress, though. There's a difference between hearing the quality of the chord and hearing the pitch that the chord is created off of. There's a difference between having what's called perfect pitch and having what's called relative pitch. Perfect pitch is, I attended college at Moorhead State University, and there was a girl that was in my school, was in the college at the time, where you could go to the piano and you could play a note on the piano and they would go, she would say, oh, that's an E flat or that's a B flat. She could hear the pitch. I don't have that. I have what's called relative pitch. I can hear, combinations of chords making a 1, 4, 5, that sort of thing. Or whether it's major or minor, but I can't definitively hear whether it's in the key of A or B flat or E flat or something like that. I don't have that skill. I can generalize because I'm a guitar player. If it's a guitar song, it's probably in the key of A or G or something like that, but I'm not doing that through, the ability to hear the pitch. I'm doing that through life experience. So that's a different kind of thing. So when you're hearing these chords, don't think that you've got to define it as B flat or A flat or something like that. Think more about the quality of the chord itself, okay? Which leads to the next part, which is chord progressions. So getting used to being able to hear chord progressions, common chord progressions, if you know what those are, like a 1-4-5 chord progression, or a 1-2-5, or a 1-4-5-6. And again, they could be in any order, right? So again, you might have a friend or a relative or something that plays a chord progression. And you hear that and you're thinking to yourself, okay, they all sound like, major chords. It must be a 1-4-5, right? That sort of thing. And then you could go back and say, well, where is it? And then you could figure out the key or whatever it might be. But getting used to those chord progressions. Now, if any of this is foreign to you, maybe study some, information on chords and chord progressions and understanding some music theory behind some of those things. That's all very important to be able to do. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So step number one, just developing your basic understanding of intervals. And I'm not saying every interval. That might be great in a perfect world, but start with things that you're going to be using. Again, a major third, maybe a fourth, a fifth, that sort of thing, things that you really need to know. Then defining melodies, getting used to being able to hear something in your head. And it might be, again, it could be a song. Could be a children's song, could be a popular song, whatever. Could be a chorus to a song. But just being able to figure out where that is on your guitar. And then we've got chords. Basic development of hearing a major chord versus a minor chord. And learning to hear the difference in that. If you decide you want to take that further, I would suggest doing something like seventh chords. Learning to hear a major 7 versus a dominant 7, right? That kind of thing. Learning to hear that. But start with major and minor first, because that's something that's going to be far more useful on a regular daily basis for you. Then chord progressions. Learning to hear, if you've studied any of my music theory stuff, I always talk about how if you're in a major key, the 1-4-5 is major, the 2-3-6 is minor, and the 7 is diminished, okay? And then modes are built off that major scale, all those kinds of things. But developing and understanding the major scale is crucial to all of this music theory stuff, and certainly with ear training. So that's what I would do. And then you could start doing things like, when I start teaching people about ear training for the first time, I try and take very, very simple songs and teach them. And by simple, I don't mean like a child song or something. I mean maybe a real straightforward, basic power chord song. And teach them how to hear the sound of the chords moving upward or downward, right? Very simply, if we did like, Mother by Danzig, it doesn't matter whether the chords are right. And that's very important, because if I do this, okay, the way the song is originally recorded, maybe they're using bar chords or doing this or this. But when you first start trying to train your ear, you're not trying to hear all of that. You're trying to hear motion. It's coming from up here, and you can hear it going down, and then you can hear it coming back up. There's a song that I always used to teach by Ramones, and every time I teach it on YouTube, it blocks the sound. So I'm not even going to say the name of the song. But it goes like this. And I would always use that song as an example, because you can clearly hear da 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 da, that kind of rhythm, and you can hear the chord moving downward and then coming back up. So it's a great song to develop visualization of chords for a guitar player in your head, and then being able to go to the guitar. Now, again, one guitar player might hear it more as a bar chord, and one guitar player might hear it more as power chords, and one guitar player might hear it more as open chords, and that's all fine. Again, that's further down the line, and I've never really been a stickler for playing songs exactly like an artist anyway. I play by ear, and I always think what's most important for me isn't just trying to replicate how the original artist did it, but how does it make sense in my head and in my fingers on my fretboard, because I'm the one that has to play it with a band and remember how it goes, and all whatever is encompassed in that. Now, if I want to learn it the exact same way an artist does, that's great. I mean, if there's something to be gained by that, I think that's a wonderful thing. But it's also a secondary thing, right? You'd still want to be able to hear those pitches and figure out where it is. So think about that a little bit as you're trying to develop your ear, all right? So take care, have a wonderful week, and stay positive, keep practicing. And as usual, if you're looking for any kind of guitar lesson needs or materials, head over to guitarzoom.com. I would sure appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all soon, okay?